their children as well, and their children's children. Forever, she breathed, almost aloud. Forever and forever, this dying will never end. She should have seen this particular horror coming, though she thought she had recognized its elements from the beginning. She should have done something to stop it before it had a chance to start. It was a familiar thought, accompanied by a familiar stab of pain. There was nothing she could have said, nothing she could have done that would have changed what happened, would have prevented the disaster. Watching Enosh playing with flat stones by her bench, building something it seemed, she found her mind circling back to that disastrous day to live it again. This time, she did not struggle against the familiar flood of memory, but let it fill her, let it have its way. The day had been hot. It was the end of the summer. Proudly she had watched Cain, her firstborn son, going out into the fields to choose some of his crop as an offering for the Lord. She remembered how happy she had been on the day of his birth. She had named him Cain, this new little man she and Adam had received from the Lord, and they had rejoiced together in every new thing he learned. She had been equally pleased when Abel, their second son, was born. The boys had made their marriage complete in a way neither she nor Adam had envisioned, and they delighted in both, though the two were very different in talents and temperament, and relations between them were very uneasy. Nevertheless, they had loved each other deeply, and Eve had trusted that their affection would smooth out the difficulties in the relationship when they became men. Abel was easygoing, accepting everyone cheerfully. As he was loving and uncomplicated, everyone loved him. So he found his path smoothed and found joy in all he did. Everything seemed to prosper under his hand, to flourish in his care. Cain was more edgy. He loved his brother, but he seemed to feel that he was in competition with Abel for their parents' love and attention, a competition Abel didn't even seem to notice, which hadn't helped at all, Eve thought. She tried carefully to intervene, but she was unable to convince Cain that he was well loved as Abel, and Abel only laughed in disbelief when she mentioned the problem to him, and continued to treat Cain as he always had, with warm, if casual affection. So it was on the day the brothers were to offer sacrifice of thanksgiving, first fruits of their labors to the Lord God. Eve remembered thinking as she watched Cain disappear into his fields that this might be the occasion when he and Abel might finally enter fully into brotherhood, and Cain might find some peace. The young men had both labored hard and prospered equally. Cain's harvest of grain, fruit, and vegetables had been abundant. Abel's flocks of sheep and goats had multiplied and grown strong and fat. There was no question that God had loved and blessed them both, and their parents in them. Perhaps now Cain could believe that his parents too loved them both and valued each brother as himself for his own gifts. Eve remembered that she had even allowed herself at that moment to hope that this prosperity was a sign that God had forgiven them, and that they might not have to die the death, maybe even that they might be allowed to return to the garden. She smiled bitterly. How foolish she had been. And then she sighed, if only she could have frozen that moment when both her sons were gathering their offerings and hope was alive that they would finally be able to love each other without the tension of Cain's fear and its bitterness. If only she could have stopped time there. But at that point she had known, and even if she had, there was nothing she could have done. There was nothing she could do now except to stop this remembering, drive out the pictures and the sounds, and turn her mind to something else, but she wasn't sure that she wanted to do that. She felt a tug at her skirt and looked down. Enosh had finished his building project and wanted her to look at it. "It's lovely, baby," she said absently, and then looked more closely. "Enosh," she asked, her eyes wide, "what have you built?" "Altar," he announced, proud to be able to get his tongue around the grown-up word. "Like Dada and Grandpa's. Fire there." Saki. He stopped, frowning impatiently at the words he could not say. "Sacrifice," Eve said softly. Feeling tears began to gather behind her eyelids and her throat. "Sacrifice," the child repeated triumphantly. "Good. Altar. Sacrifice. Good?" "Very good," whispered his grandmother. "It's a beautiful altar of sacrifice, Enosh. There's never been a better." The boy grinned at her praise. "I build house now, Grandma," he announced, and set to work. "Yes, baby," Eve murmured. "You build a house. Good boy." Her lips thinned as she pressed them together against the pain of memories Enosh's altar had brought to vivid present life. They had returned her boys now, bearing their gifts. Cain's sheaf of grain had been perfect, and apples ripe and fragrant. The squash large and sound. Abel's lambs, the firstborn of his flocks, had been healthy creatures, their legs strong, their woolly springy and clean, for he had washed them. The sacrifices had been offered with love and reverence, the brothers standing side by side. Then the unthinkable happened. The Lord God had looked with favor on Abel as his offering, but he had rejected Cain and his offering. Adam was stunned. Abel reached out with dismay to touch and comfort his brother. Cain was devastated and absolutely furious. Eve closed her eyes, feeling sick. This was going to be dreadful. For a long moment, no one made a sound. Then the Lord God spoke. He addressed Cain, but his words penetrated each of them. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door."